Jamie Dawes here from Dawes Accountants. In this video, we're going to look at reviewing aged payables on Xero and common errors that can happen and how you might correct those. So, aged payables report, if you go accounting reports, and then what you'll see is further down here in payables and receivables is the aged payables details and aged payables summary. What I recommend you do, if you star both those, it puts them in your favourites, so you don't need to scroll down and find them each time they'll be on your list. But if we look at the aged payables summary first, so what this is a summary view of all the bills that you owe to your suppliers at a point in time. So normally you review this, regular intervals, weekly, monthly, to make sure it's accurate and all your expenses are included in your accounts. So the main things you'd look out for here, obviously on a summary view, you're just looking to see if you think it looks all accurate, if there's anything to look into. So if something was sort of getting older here and you think, oh, hang on, I've paid that, so it shouldn't be on there, you'd want to look into it. Or, you'd want to look into it to think, oh, I need to arrange to pay that. So a few reasons, obviously, to look into things there. Also, you'd look at this and go, look down the list and go, is there anything on here that shouldn't be on here? Or is there anything missing that I think, oh, I've missed off the supplier balances for somebody I know I've got a statement outstanding for? You need to make sure and get those onto Xero to make sure your Xero is accurate. While we're looking at sort of spotting things that might be an error, I'll just show you quickly a test that we give to people when they sort of join us here, which shows sort of common things that can highlight errors that need to be looking into. So this is a sort of example of a aged payables report. Old school accounting wording is creditors, that we would call it creditors. Xero calls it payables. But basically it's the same thing, and just looking down this report, so you sort of spot sort of common errors. So here you see we've got two Bravo accounts, so you'd want to look to merge those, and then if you look further along, you can see we've got a payment here to one account and a bill outstanding still in another one. So if you merge those suppliers together, obviously that will sort those errors and you can allocate that payment to that bill. Moving on down, we've got demo limited, so that's someone probably messing about putting on a bill as a training perhaps that they didn't need to, so obviously you'd look to get rid of that. Then going on down, you've got the credit balances, so that would suggest that there's a payment that a bill hasn't been put on for, or you've duplicated a payment, so you owe some money back. And then again here you've got some credit balances all the way along, which suggests lots of missing bills that need to be put on the system. And then further on down, you've got things like Sainsbury's. So obviously Sainsbury's you pay, you wouldn't have credit from Sainsbury's, so it wouldn't be outstanding. So that highlights an error in the bookkeeping. And so it's just a few examples there. Obviously, if you've got old stuff, it might mean that there's errors and duplications. But looking at that summary report, those are the sort of things we'd look at to sort of think that things are wrong with the bookkeeping and not accurate. So if we go back to Xero, and so for instance, say we want to look into this in more detail because we think things are wrong, or perhaps we need to look into more errors, what we'd want to look at is the detailed report. So we've just starred it so that we can look at it aged payables detail. So we'd go into that and look at it, and then you can look at the breakdown of those balances that are on the summary report. It gives you each bill outstanding for payment. So for instance, if you go, I've definitely paid central copiers, so you'd want to look into that one. So again, if you think, oh, I've definitely paid that, what you'd want to do is either go to your bank and search for the transaction. So if we go back, you can go to your bank and search for the exact transaction on the bank account. What it could mean is, if it's outstanding on there and you think you've paid it, it could mean that you've done a spend money transaction instead of allocating it against the bill to pay. Now, a good way to spot that is to look at the contact itself. So if we looked at this invoice from this report and then went into the contact. So for instance, what we'd be left to see here is just bills and then paid bills. If you see on this list that there's a spend money transaction, what that means is in the bookkeeping, it's not being allocated against a bill, it's being just put on the system as an expense. The way that happens is if you look at your bank feed, for instance here, what it would mean is, for instance, if we're looking at this fast pay transaction and that needed to be allocated against a bill, but perhaps the amount didn't quite match up to the bill, so you had to use find and match to find the bill, but that process was skipped and it was just assumed that there was no bill to allocate it against. So what we'd always recommend at this, if that's happening, is when you're doing your bookkeeping, is to have that aged payables report open so that you always know if there's bills to pay. So if you have two screens, you can put your bills to pay on another screen, or put your aged receivables port on another tab. But let's go back to that. And for instance, this was created as just these details were filled in, so it went on as a spend money transaction to the supplier rather than being allocated against the bill. So that would create a bookkeeping error. So if a spend money transaction was on the contact screen that we just showed just now, that would highlight a bookkeeping error that needs correction. So what you would do is you would go to your spend money transaction by clicking on the contact page to view it, and then you can remove and redo that transaction, and then it will bring it back onto this reconciliation screen, and then you can then use find and match to allocate it against your supplier correctly. You might need to do a split transaction to split the invoice if it was partially paid, or you might need to allocate it against a couple invoices if it was payment for a couple invoices, to correct the bookkeeping for those aged payables, which can be common errors. It could also show, when you look at that contact screen, if we go back there, it could show you that you've got duplications. So it could say that, it could show you that perhaps Bayside Club here, if you look at your list, it could show you that you've got two bills on here for the same thing. So you just need to go in there and remove one of the duplicated bills, which is another common error on payables. So that would be it, really. Once you're happy that that report only shows outstanding bills due for payment, that's when you'd be happy that your bookkeeping is complete for the period.